Chapter 2 of the Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 2 Death in the Fog. A telephone bell rang in darkness. The third time it rang, bed springs creaked, fingers fumbled on wood, something small and hard thudded on a carpeted floor, the springs creaked again, and a man's voice said, "Hello? Yes, speaking. Dead? Yes. 15 minutes. Thanks." A switch clicked, and a white bowl, hung on 3 gilded chains from the ceiling center, filled the room with light. Spade, barefooted in green and white check pajamas, sat on the side of his bed. He scowled thoughtfully at the telephone on the table, while his hands took from beside it a packet of brown papers and a sack of Bull Durham tobacco. Cold, steamy air blew in through 2 open windows, bringing with it, half a dozen times a minute, the Alcatraz foghorn's dull moaning. A tinny alarm clock, insecurely mounted on a corner of Duke's Celebrated Criminal Cases of America, which lay face down on the table, held its hands at 5 minutes past 2. Spade's thick fingers made a cigarette with deliberate care, sifting a measured quantity of the tan flakes down into curving paper, spreading the flakes so that they lay equal at the ends with a slight depression in the middle, thumbs rolling the paper's inner edge down and up under the outer edge as forefingers pressed it over, thumbs and fingers sliding to the paper cylinder's ends, holding it even while tongue licked the flap, left forefinger and thumb pinching their end, while right forefinger and thumb smoothed the damp seam, right forefinger and thumb twisting their end and lifting the other to Spade's mouth. He picked up the pigskin and nickel lighter that had been knocked off the table, worked it, and with the cigarette burning in a corner of his mouth, stood up. He took off his pajamas. The smooth thickness of his arms, legs, and body, the sag of his big rounded shoulders, made his body look like a bear's. It looked like a shaved bear's. His chest was hairless. His skin was childishly smooth and pink. He scratched the back of his neck and began to dress. He put on a thin white union suit, gray socks, black garters, and dark brown shoes. When he had laced his shoes, he picked up the telephone, called Greystone 4500, and ordered a taxicab. He put on a green-striped white shirt, a soft white collar, a green necktie, the gray suit he had worn that day, a loose tweed overcoat, and a dark gray hat. The street doorbell rang as he switched off the light. Where Bush Street roofed Stockton before slipping downhill to Chinatown, Spade paid his fare and left the taxicab. San Francisco's night fog, thin, clammy, and penetrant, blurred the street. A few yards from where Spade had dismissed the taxicab, a small group of men stood looking up an alley. 2 women stood with a man on the other side of Bush Street looking at the alley. There were faces at windows. Spade crossed the sidewalk between iron-railed hatchways that opened above bare, ugly stairs, went to the parapet, and resting his hands on the damp coping, looked down onto Stockton Street. An automobile popped out of the tunnel beneath him with a roaring swish, as if it had been blown out, and ran away. Not far from the tunnel's mouth, a man was hunkered on his heels before a billboard that held advertisements of a moving picture and gasoline across the front of a gap between 2 store buildings. The hunkered man's head was bent almost to the sidewalk, so he could look under the billboard. A hand flat on the sidewalk, a hand clenched on the billboard's green wooden frame, held him in this grotesque position. 2 other men stood awkwardly close together at one end of the billboard, peeping through the few inches of space between it and the building at that end. The building at the other end had a blank gray sidewall that looked down on the lot behind the billboard. Lights flickered on the sidewall and the shadows of men moving among lights. Spade turned from the parapet and walked up Bush Street to the alley where men were grouped. A uniformed policeman, chewing gum under an enamel sign that said Burritt Street in white against dark blue, put out an arm and asked, "What do you want here?" "I'm Sam Spade. Tom Polhouse phoned me." "Sure you are." The policeman's arm went down. "I didn't know you at first." "Well, they're back there." He jerked a thumb over his shoulder. Bad business. Bad enough, Spade agreed and went up the alley. Halfway up it, not far from the entrance, a dark ambulance stood. Behind the ambulance, on the left, the alley was bounded by a waist-high fence, 3 strips of rough boarding. From the fence, dark ground fell away steeply to the billboard on Stockton Street below. A 10-foot length of the fence's top rail had been torn from a post at one end and hung dangling from the other. 15 feet down the slope, a flat boulder stuck out. In the notch between boulder and slope, Miles Archer lay on his back. 2 men stood over him. One of them held an electric torch's beam on the dead man. Other men with lights moved up and down the slope. One of them hailed Spade. "Hello, Sam," and clambered up to the alley, his shadow running up before him. He was a barrel-bellied tall man with shrewd small eyes, a thick mouth, and carelessly shaven dark jowls. His shoes, knees, hands, and chin were daubed with brown loam. "I figured you went to see it before we took him away," he said as he stepped over the broken fence. "Yes, thanks, Tom," Spade said. "What happened?" He put an elbow on a fence post and looked down at the men below, nodding to those who nodded to him. Tom Polehouse poked his own left breast with a dirty finger. "Got him right through the pump with this." He took a fat revolver from his coat pocket and held it out to Spade. Mud inlaid the depressions in the revolver's surface. "A Webley. English, ain't it?" Spade took his elbow from the fence post and leaned down to look at the weapon, but he did not touch it. "Yes," he said. "Webley Fosbury semi-automatic revolver. That's it. 38, 8-shot. They don't make them anymore. How many gone out of it?" "1 shot." Tom poked his breast again. "He must have been dead when he cracked the fence." He raised the muddy revolver. "You've seen this before?" Spade nodded. "I've seen Webley Fosbury's," he said indifferently, and then spoke rapidly. "He was shot up here, huh? Standing where you are, with his back to the fence. The man that shot him stands here." He went around in front of Tom and raised a hand breast high with leveled forefinger. "Lets him have it, and Miles goes back, taking the top off the fence and going on through and down till the rock catches him. That it?" "That's it," Tom replied slowly, working his brows together. "The shot burned his coat." "Who found him?" "The man on the beat, Schilling. He was coming down Bush, and just as he got here, a machine turning around threw headlights up here, and he saw the top rail off. So he came up and found him." "What about the machine that was turning around?" "Not a damn thing about it, Sam. Schilling didn't pay much attention to it, not knowing anything was wrong. He says nobody didn't come out of here during the time it took him to come down from Powell, or he'd have seen them. The only other way out would be under the billboard on Stockton. Nobody went that way. The fog's got the ground soggy, and the only marks are where Miles slid down and where this gun here rolled." "Didn't anybody hear the shot?" "For the love of God, Sam, we only just got here. Somebody must have heard it, when we find them." He turned and put a leg over the fence. "Coming down for a look at him before he's moved?" Spade said, "No." Tom halted astride the fence to look back at Spade with surprised, small eyes. Spade said, "You've seen him. You'd see everything I could." Tom, still looking at Spade, nodded doubtfully and withdrew his leg over the fence. "His gun was tucked away on his hip," he said. "It hadn't been fired. There was $160-some in his clothes. Was he working, Sam?" Spade, after a moment's hesitation, nodded. Tom asked, "Well?" "He was supposed to be tailing a fellow named Floyd Thursby," Spade said, and described Thursby as Miss Wonderly had described him. "What for?" Spade put his hands into his overcoat pockets and blinked sleepy eyes at Tom. Tom repeated impatiently, "What for?" "He was an Englishman, maybe. I don't know what his game was exactly. We were trying to find out where he lived." Spade grinned softly and took a hand from his pocket to pat Tom's shoulder. Don't crowd me." He put the hand in his pocket again. "I'm going out to break the news to Miles's wife." He turned away. Tom, scowling, opened his mouth, closed it without having said anything, cleared his throat, put the scowl off his face, and spoke with a husky sort of gentleness. "It's tough him getting it like that. Miles had his faults, same as the rest of us, but I guess he must have had his good points, too." "I guess so." Spade agreed in a tone that was utterly meaningless and went out of the alley. In an all-night drugstore on the corner of Bush and Taylor Streets, Spade used a telephone. "Precious," he said into it, sometime after he had given Central a number. "Miles has been shot. Yes, he's dead. Now don't get excited. Yes, you'll have to break it to Iva. No, I'm damned if I will. You've got to do it. That's a good girl. And keep her away from the office. Tell her I'll see her, sometime. Yes, but don't tie me up to anything. That's the stuff. You're an angel. Bye." Spade's tinny alarm clock said 3:40 when he turned on the light in the suspended bowl again. He dropped his hat and overcoat on the bed and went into his kitchen, returning to the bedroom with a wine glass and a tall, dark bottle of Bacardi. He poured a drink and drank it standing. Then he put bottle and glass on the table, sat down on the side of the bed facing them, and rolled a cigarette. He had drunk his third glass of Bacardi and was lighting his fifth cigarette when the street doorbell rang. The hands of the alarm clock stood at 4:30. He sighed, rose from the bed, and went to the telephone box beside his bathroom door. He pressed the button that released the street door lock. He muttered, "Damn her," and stood scowling at the black telephone box, breathing irregularly while a dull flush grew in his cheeks. The grating and rattling of the elevator door being opened and closed came from the corridor. Spade sighed again and moved toward the corridor door. Soft, heavy footsteps sounded on the carpeted floor outside, the footsteps of two men. Spade's face brightened. His eyes were no longer harassed. He opened the door quickly. "Hello, Tom," he said to the barrel-bellied tall detective with whom he had talked in Burrett Street, and, "Hello, Lieutenant," to the man beside him. "Come in." They nodded together, neither saying anything, and came in. Spade shut the door and ushered them back into his bedroom. Tom sat on an end of the sofa by the window. The lieutenant sat on a chair beside the table. The lieutenant was a compactly built man with a round head under short-cut grizzled hair and a square face behind a short-cut grizzled mustache. A $5 gold piece was pinned to his necktie, and there was a small, elaborate, diamond-set secret society emblem on his lapel. Spade brought 2 wine glasses in from the kitchen, filled them and his own with Bacardi, gave one to each of his guests, and sat down with his on the side of the bed. Spade's face was placid and incurious. He raised his glass and said, "Success to crime," and drank it down. Tom emptied his glass, set it on the floor beside him, and wiped his mouth with the back of a muddy finger. He stared to the foot of the bed as if he were trying to remember something of which it vaguely reminded him. The lieutenant looked at his glass for a dozen seconds, took a very small sip of the rum, and put the glass on the table at his elbow. He examined the room with hard, deliberate eyes, and then looked at Tom. Tom moved uncomfortably on the sofa, and without looking up asked, "Did you break the news to Miles's wife, Sam?" Spade said, "Uh-huh." "How'd she take it?" Spade shook his head. "I don't know anything about women." Tom said softly, "The hell you don't." The lieutenant put his hands on his knees and leaned forward. His greenish eyes looked at Spade with a peculiarly rigid stare, as if their focus was a matter of mechanics, to be changed only by pulling a lever or pressing a button. "What kind of a gun do you carry?" he asked. "None. I don't like them much. There are some in the office, of course." "I'd like to see one of them," the lieutenant said. "You don't happen to have one here?" "No." "You sure of that?" "Look around." Spade smiled and waved his empty glass a little. turn the dump upside down if you want. I won't squawk if you've got a search warrant." Tom protested. "Oh, hell, Sam." Spade put his glass on the table and stood up facing the lieutenant. "What do you want, Dundee?" he asked in a voice hard and cold as his eyes. Lieutenant Dundee's eyes had moved to maintain their focus on Spade's. Only his eyes had moved. Tom shifted his bulk on the sofa again, blew a deep breath out through his nose, and growled plaintively, "We're not wanting to make any trouble, Sam." Spade, ignoring Tom, said to Dundee, "Well, what do you want? Talk turkey. Who in hell do you think you are, coming in here trying to rope me?" "All right," Dundee said in his chest. "Now sit down and listen." "I'll sit or stand as I damned please," said Spade, not moving. "For God's sake, be reasonable," Tom begged. "What's the use of us having a row? If you want to know why we didn't talk turkey, it's because when I asked you who this Thursby was, you as good as told me it was none of my business. You can't treat us that way, Sam. It ain't right, and it won't get you anywheres. We got our work to do." Lieutenant Dundee jumped up, stood close to Spade, and thrust his square pink face up at the taller man's. "I've told you before, your foot was going to slip one of these days." Spade made a deprecative mouth, raising his eyebrows. "Everybody's foot slips sometime," he said with derisive mildness. "And maybe this is your time?" Spade smiled and shook his head. "No, I'll do nicely, thank you." He stopped smiling. His upper lip on the left side twitched over his eye tooth. His eyes became narrow and sultry. His voice came out deep as the lieutenant's. "I don't like this. What are you sucking around for? Tell me, or get out and let me go to bed." "Who's Thursby?" Dundee snapped. "I told Tom what I knew about him." "You told Tom damn little." "I knew damned little." "Why were you tailing him?" "I wasn't. Miles was. For the swell reason that we had a client who was paying good United States money to have him tailed." "Who's the client?" Placidity came back to Spade's face and voice. Now, he said reprovingly. "You know I can't tell you that until I've talked it over with the client." "You'll tell it to me or you'll tell it in court," Dundee said hotly. "This is murder, and don't forget it." "Maybe. And here's something for you to not forget, sweetheart. I'll tell it or not as I damned please. It's a long while since I burst out crying because policemen didn't like me." Tom came over and sat on the foot of the bed. His carelessly shaven, mud-smeared face was tired and lined. "Be reasonable, Sam," he pleaded. "Give us a chance. How can we turn up anything on Miles's killing if you won't give us what you've got?" "You needn't get a headache over that," Spade told him. "I'll bury my dead." Lieutenant Dundee sat down and put his hands on his knees again. His eyes were warm green discs. "I thought you would," he said. He smiled with grim content. "That's just exactly why we came to see you, isn't it, Tom?" Tom groaned, but said nothing articulate. Spade watched Dundee warily. "That's just what I said to Tom," the lieutenant went on. "I said, 'Tom, I've got a hunch that Sam Spade's a man to keep the family troubles in the family.' That's just what I said to him." Spade put the wariness out of his eyes. He made them look bored. He turned his face to Tom and asked with great carelessness, "What's itching your boyfriend now?" Dundee jumped up and tapped Spade's chest with the ends of two bent fingers. "Just this," he said, taking pains to make each word very distinct, emphasizing them with repeated taps. "Thursby was shot down in front of his hotel just 35 minutes after you left Burritt Street." Spade spoke, taking equal pains with his words. "Keep your damned dirty paws off me." Dundee withdrew the tapping fingers, but there was no change in his voice. "Tom says you were in too much of a hurry to even stop for a look at your partner." Tom growled apologetically. Well, damn it, Sam, you did run off like that. You didn't go to Archer's house to tell his wife, the lieutenant's accusing voice went on. We called up and that girl in your office was there and said you sent her. Spade nodded. His face was stupid in its blankness. Lieutenant Dundee raised the two bent fingers toward the private detective's chest, quickly lowered them, and said, I give you 10 minutes to get to a phone and do your talking to the girl. I give you 10 to 15 minutes to get to Thursby's joint, Gary near Leavenworth. You could do it easy in that time. And that gives you 10 or 15 minutes of waiting before he showed up. I knew where he lived, Spade asked. And I knew he hadn't gone straight home after killing Miles. You knew what you knew, Dundee replied stubbornly. What time did you get home? 20 minutes to 4. I walked around thinking things over. The lieutenant wagged his round head up and down. We knew you weren't home at 3:30, he said. We tried to get you on the phone. Where'd you do your walking? Out Bush Street, away and back. Did you see anybody that... No witnesses, Spade said and laughed, but pleasantly now. Sit down, Dundee. You haven't finished your drink. Get your glass, Tom. Tom said, No thanks. Dundee sat down, but paid no attention to his glass of rum. Spade filled his own glass, drank, put the empty glass on the table, and resumed his seat on the side of the bed. I know where I stand now, he said, looking with friendly eyes from one police detective to the other. I'm sorry I got up on my hind legs, but you birds made me nervous, coming in and trying to put the work on me. Having Miles knocked off bothered me, and then you birds cracking foxy. That's all right now, though, now that I know what you're up to. Tom said, Forget it. The lieutenant said nothing. Spade asked, Thursby's dead? While the lieutenant hesitated, Tom said, Yes. Then the lieutenant said angrily, And you might just as well know it, if you don't, that he died before he could tell anybody anything. Spade was rolling a cigarette. He asked without looking up, What do you mean by that? You think I did know it? I meant what I said, Dundee replied bluntly. Spade looked up at him and smiled, holding the finished cigarette in one hand, his lighter in the other. You're not ready to pinch me yet, are you, Dundee? He asked. Dundee shook his head no. Then, said Spade, there's no particular reason why I should give a damn what you think, is there? Dundee looked at Spade with hard green eyes and said nothing. Tom said, Aw, be reasonable, Sam. Spade put the cigarette in his mouth, set fire to it, and laughed smoke out. I'll be reasonable, Tom, he promised. How'd I kill this Thursby? I've forgotten. Tom grunted disgust. Lieutenant Dundee said, He was shot 4 times in the back, with a .44 or .45 from across the street, when he started to go into his hotel. That's the way it figures, though nobody saw it. And he was wearing a Luger in a shoulder holster, Tom added, and it hadn't been fired. What do the hotel people know about him? Spade asked. Nothing, except that he'd been there a week. Alone? Alone. What did you find on him, or in his room? Dundee drew his lips in and asked, What did you think we'd find? Spade made a careless motion with his limp cigarette. Something to tell you who he was, what his store was? Did you? We thought you could tell us that. Spade looked at the lieutenant with yellow-gray eyes that held an almost exaggerated amount of candor. I've never seen Thursby, he said, dead or alive. Lieutenant Dundee stood up looking dissatisfied. Tom rose, yawning and stretching. We've asked you what we came to ask, Dundee said, frowning over eyes hard as green pebbles. He held his mustached upper lip tight against his teeth, letting his lower lip push the words out. We've told you more than you've told us. That's fair enough. You know me, Spade. If you did or you didn't, you'll get a square deal out of me and most of the breaks. I don't know that I blame you a hell of a lot for dropping him, but that won't keep me from nailing you. Fair enough, Spade agreed evenly. But I'd feel better about it if you drink your drink. Lieutenant Dundee turned to the table, picked up his glass, and slowly drained it. Then he said, "Good night," and held out his hand. They shook hands with marked formality. Tom and Spade shook hands with marked formality. Spade let them out, then he undressed, turned off the lights, and went to bed. End of Chapter 2.